To whoever had the idea of casting Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers, I just have this to say to you. You are amazing.
I think the best thing we can do is to let people know that each one of them is precious.
So A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is a biographical movie, but not a biographical movie about Mr. Rogers, which is what I was expecting going into this movie. Instead, what this movie is really about, it's about a journalist who works for Esquire in the late 1990s, if I remember correctly, who was sent on assignment to interview Mr. Rogers. Alright guys, so let's get into A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I was interested in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood for one specific reason, and that was Tom Hanks playing Fred Rogers. I mean, seriously, you couldn't have cast a more perfect actor to play the part of essentially the greatest human being who ever lived. But to cut to the chase, guys, I really liked A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Starting off with the acting department, as you would probably expect, Tom Hanks absolutely crushes it as Mr. Rogers. Now, you would probably think that due to Tom Hanks being one of the biggest movie stars ever, that it would take a couple of minutes to probably adjust to him playing Fred Rogers. No. The moment I saw him on screen, I saw Fred Rogers. Not only does Tom Hanks absolutely nail Fred Rogers' mannerisms, but he nails the way he walks, he nails how he talks, but he also just nails Mr. Rogers' optimism and just the way how he connects with certain people. Every time that there was a scene that had Tom Hanks in this movie, I could not get enough of him. And actually, every time that they cut away from Tom Hanks in this movie, I wanted them to go back to Tom Hanks and the friendship that he has with this journalist. And speaking of which, Matthew Rhys does a really good job as well playing the journalist who is sent to interview Fred Rogers. And I'm not gonna lie, there's a couple of scenes in which I thought he really brought it. Also, one person that I think is not gonna get enough credit for his performance in this movie is Chris Cooper, who plays the journalist's father in this movie. Wow, he was great. Particularly, there's a scene in the third act that's between him and Matthew Rhys that hit me a lot harder than I expected. My favorite scenes of this movie, though, were the scenes in which the interviewer is talking to Fred Rogers, in which you can clearly tell he's just trying to get his heaven done, but Fred Rogers can see a broken man behind this guy's mask. Because if you guys have seen Fred Rogers' show, Fred Rogers was a guy that loved connecting to people, whether you were a kid, an adult, or even an elderly guy. Fred Rogers was a guy that just loved talking to people, and I love the scenes in which Fred Rogers was talking to the guy just to get to know him on a much more deeper level. Something else, though, that I really loved about this film, and I thought this was actually really creative, was how they used the miniatures of Mr. Rogers' show as a way to transition from scene to scene. Because when I saw this first happening, I just thought, this is different, because when I first saw them doing this, it actually kind of threw me off, but the more and more I saw it, I just thought, okay, this is actually pretty genius. And something else that I loved about this film, and I'm not going to give it away for you guys if you haven't seen it yet, but in the second half of this movie, right when it starts out, there is a really cool and kind of a trippy sequence into which, again, not going to give it away, but what happens here, I thought was actually awesome. And are there times in which this movie is just so full of positivity that you want to tear up? Yes, there are. One scene in particular that takes place on a train, yeah, I did get misty-eyed, not gonna lie. Unfortunately, even though I really liked this movie, I didn't love it. Now, something that I will say about this movie is this. If you guys are going into this movie expecting a straight-up Fred Rogers biopic like I was, you might be a little disappointed. Now, while Fred Rogers is definitely a key factor in this movie, what this movie is really about is a family drama of a guy that has a lot of personal stuff with his past, and when he meets Fred Rogers, he essentially has him confronting his past issues. Don't get me wrong though, while the family drama stuff in this movie was fairly well done, I was expecting a lot more with Fred Rogers than I was expecting that I got. At the same time, while the family drama stuff was well done, it does feel like a typical Hallmark family drama. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, during the first half of the film, I could not get behind the main character that Matthew Rhys plays. Now, like I mentioned before, Matthew Rhys does do a very good job of playing this character, but the character himself, I just thought he was such a jerk. There's a scene in particular in which his boss is telling him about Mr. Rogers, and he has this response, and I just thought in my head, how dare you? And while this movie did have me misty-eyed at a couple of parts, did it hit me as hard as Won't You Be My Neighbor? No. Though it is a bit unfair to make that comparison, I still couldn't help feel that way. So overall, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood was a really well done drama, and Tom Hanks particularly couldn't have done a better job playing perhaps the greatest human being who ever lived. And even though there were definitely a few spots in which I did feel a bit misty-eyed, I just wish I loved it. All in all though, I really dug this movie, so I am going to give A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Though if you guys want a deep dive into Fred Rogers, I am going to definitely recommend Won't You Be My Neighbor. That is a phenomenal documentary that should have been nominated for Best Documentary at the Oscars. I have not let that go. Alrighty guys, so comment out and let me know below. Have you guys seen A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood? What did you guys think? Let me know below. If y'all want to follow me on social media, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. I'm also on Snapchat and Stardust. So if you guys want to follow me on all those social media platforms, all the links and the usernames are in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. If so, please hit that like button and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video of mine goes live. If you guys want to see any of my previous 2 reviews, please click either right here or there. And of course, until my next review, I will see you all next time.